Honeymoon horror, when lovers vanish forever. Imagine pure joy, a journey you start with a heart full of love, dreaming of forever. Now, picture that dream vanishing, not into a sweet memory, but into a silent abyss. One moment, there's laughter, plans, a shared future. The next, just abandoned belongings and questions that hang in the air for decades. This isn't a movie script. For some, the promise of a romantic trip, a honeymoon, or even just a night out with someone they love, becomes the chilling prelude to an eternal mystery. Honeymoons are supposed to be about bliss, an escape, a celebration of a new life together. They're meant to be a string of firsts, of precious memories carefully made. But what happens when that special time, that journey of love, takes a totally unimaginable turn? What if the path leads not to a future together, but to a terrifying, empty space? Today, we're looking into the chilling stories of couples who set off on adventures of love, only to disappear mid-journey. Their plans, their laughter, their very lives seemingly wiped away. These are the tales of dream getaways that twisted into nightmares that never end, leaving behind only the ghosts of happy plans and the heavy, cold silence where love used to be. We'll explore baffling cases where all that's left are haunting questions and the crushing weight of the unknown. Story 1. Glen and Bessie Hyde, the Grand Canyon's eternal honeymooners. The year was 1928. The world was different then, on the edge of huge changes, but still wild and untamed in many places. It was in this time of daring adventure and romantic dreams that Glen and Bessie Hyde set out on a honeymoon that was as bold as it was a symbol of their adventurous hearts. Glen, an experienced outdoorsman from Idaho, and Bessie, a lively artist and poet from West Virginia, weren't your typical newlyweds. Bessie, especially, wanted to make her mark. She aimed to be the first woman on record to successfully ride the dangerous waters of the Grand Canyon's Colorado River. Their plan was ambitious. Conquer the river in a 20-foot wooden scow, a sweet boat Glen had carefully built himself, made for the tough currents and rapids ahead. They started their journey in October, launching from Green River, Utah, buzzing with the kind of optimism and grit that only young love and thrilling adventure can spark. They were quite a pair. Glen, rugged and skilled. Bessie, bubbly and determined, her short-cropped hair and practical clothes showing she was ready for the wild. They documented their early progress, their spirits high as they navigated the upper canyons. Bessie reportedly told another river runner they met, "I wonder if I'll be the first woman to go through the Grand Canyon and come out alive." Those words, full of hopeful ambition, would later take on a very dark, ominous meaning. As they journeyed deeper into the maze-like heart of the Grand Canyon, the isolation must have become intense. The towering canyon walls, billions of years old, would have made their small boat look tiny, the roar of the Colorado River their constant soundtrack. The last time other people definitely saw them was on November 15th, 1928. They'd stopped at the home of Emery Kolb, a famous Grand Canyon photographer and adventurer, at Grand Canyon Village on the South Rim. Kolb, who with his brother Ellsworth had famously navigated the river years before, gave the Hyde supplies and took what would be the last known photos of the couple. By all accounts, they seemed in good spirits, maybe a bit weary from the trail, but still set on finishing their journey to Needles, California. Bessie, it was noted, seemed particularly keen to set a speed record. After that meeting, they pushed off back into the river, disappearing downstream, into the huge, rugged wilderness. Weeks passed, then a month, and worry started to grow. Glen had promised his father he'd be out of the canyon by early December. When there was no word, the alarm was raised. On December 19th, an aerial search began, a pretty new idea for the time. And it was from the air that their boat was finally spotted. It wasn't wrecked, but eerily intact, just floating idly in the river around mile 232. When a search party reached the scow on December 20th, a chilling scene met them. The boat was upright and fully stocked with food, clothing, Bessie's diary, and even Glen's rifle. Everything looked like it was in order, as if the couple had just stepped away for a second. Bessie's diary entries, though touching in their descriptions of the trip, gave no hint of upcoming trouble or distress. The last entry was from late November, detailing their progress and the everyday things about life on the river. There was no sign of a struggle, no note, nothing to explain why they were gone. Glen and Bessie Hyde had simply vanished. The ground searches that followed were huge and incredibly difficult, covering miles of harsh terrain, dangerous cliffs, and the powerful, unpredictable river. Rescuers, including experienced rivermen and Native American trackers, combed the banks and side canyons. Despite all their efforts, no trace of Glen or Bessie was found. It was as if the canyon had just swallowed them whole. With no bodies or real evidence, theories started to fly, from the tragically believable to the darkly romantic and downright strange. The most straightforward idea was accidental drowning. The Colorado River, especially back then before dams controlled it, was notoriously dangerous. A sudden flip in a violent rapid, a misstep on a slippery rock during a hike, or hypothermia could have taken them quickly, their bodies perhaps swept away and hidden by the massive river system. Yet, the fact that their boat was intact and orderly argued against a violent capsize. If they had fallen out, why wasn't the boat damaged or further downstream? Then came the more sinister whispers. Murder. Had they run into someone hostile in the remote wilderness? It seemed unlikely given how isolated they were, but it couldn't be completely ruled out. Some even guessed it was a murder-suicide, though there was nothing in their personalities or relationship to point to such a dark turn. One of the most lasting and sensational theories actually centered on Bessie. Years later, in 1971, a woman on a commercial Grand Canyon rafting trip, after hearing the story of the Hydes, supposedly claimed she was Bessie Hyde. She said she'd stabbed Glen in a fit of rage after an argument, hiked out of the canyon alone, and started a new life. She later took back this dramatic confession, and there was no evidence to back it up. But the story caught on with the public, adding another layer of mystery to the case. This Bessie killed Glen theory painted her as a sort of femme fatale, a woman who shed her identity right along with her husband in the depths of the canyon. Making things even more complicated, skeletal remains found over the years in the Grand Canyon area were sometimes thought to be the Hydes. In 1976, the skeleton of a young man, apparently shot, was found on the south rim near where the Hyde scow was discovered. For a while, people thought this could be Glen Hyde. However, forensic analysis eventually proved this wrong, and the remains were identified as someone else who was missing. Later, in 2001, bones found near a riverside grave said to belong to a drifter were tested with DNA technology against Bessie's living relatives, but there was no match. Decades have gone by, and the mystery of Glen and Bessie Hyde is still one of the Grand Canyon's most haunting and iconic unsolved cases. Their story is a sharp reminder of the thin line between adventure and danger, love and loss. Did they fall victim to the raw power of the river they tried to conquer? Or did something more human, something darker, play a role in their disappearance? Their scow, recovered and now a museum piece, stands as a silent witness to their ambition and their tragic, unfinished journey. The Grand Canyon keeps its secrets close, and the fate of the adventurous honeymooners who dared to challenge its depths remains locked within its ancient, silent walls, their love story forever tangled with the wild, unforgiving beauty of the place where they were last seen alive, together. Story 2, William and Margaret Patterson, the affluent couple who vanished into thin air. In the sun-soaked border city of El Paso, Texas, William David Patterson and his wife, Margaret, were well-known and respected. William, or Bill as most knew him, owned a successful photo supply business, a clear sign of his sharp mind and hard work. Margaret, affectionately called First High by her friends, was known for her social grace and her work in the community. They lived a comfortable, wealthy life in a lovely home, their days filled with business, social events, and the quiet routines of a long-married couple. By all accounts, they were stable, content, and deeply connected to their city. So their sudden and completely baffling disappearance on March 6, 1957, shattered this picture of normal life and grew into one of El Paso's most enduring and puzzling mysteries. The day they vanished started like any other. William went to his office, handled his business, and came home in the evening. Margaret had spent the day managing their home. There were no known arguments, no signs of trouble, nothing to suggest anything was wrong. Their Cadillac was parked in the garage. Their clothes were in the closets, personal items seemingly untouched. Even their cat was left behind in the house. It was as if they had just stepped out for a moment, fully intending to come back, but never did. The alarm bells went off when William didn't show up for work the next day. That was so unlike him that it immediately worried his employees and business partners. Friends who tried to reach the Pattersons found their home silent and empty. A first check by police found the house secured, with no signs of a break-in or a struggle. The only things noted missing at first were Margaret's purse and a light coat, and maybe a little cash. This lack of any obvious disturbance just made the mystery deeper. Why would a well-off, established couple, with strong ties to their community and no clear financial or personal problems, suddenly abandon their lives, leaving almost everything behind? As days turned into weeks with no word, the investigation ramped up. Local police were soon joined by the Texas Rangers and, eventually, the FBI, as they considered the possibility that the Pattersons had crossed state lines or even left the country. Their home was meticulously searched, their finances closely examined, and their friends and associates interviewed. No suicide note was found. Their bank accounts remained untouched. No ransom demand ever came. The Pattersons had, quite simply, vanished into thin air. Initial theories were all over the place. Some suspected foul play, maybe a robbery gone wrong that ended in their abduction and murder, their bodies hidden somewhere in the vast Chihuahuan desert around El Paso. Yet, the spotless condition of their home didn't really point to a violent struggle. Could it have been a carefully planned, voluntary disappearance? That seemed just as confusing. The Pattersons had no obvious reason to run. William's business was doing well, and while every business has its ups and downs, there was no sign of impending financial disaster. They had a wide circle of friends and a comfortable life. What on earth could motivate them to secretly leave it all behind? As the investigation hit a wall, the case started getting a lot of media attention, and with that, a flood of more far-fetched theories. Given it was the Cold War era, some wondered about espionage. Could the Pattersons have been involved in some secret activities leading to their extraction or elimination? There was zero evidence for this, but in the tense atmosphere of the times, ideas like that found an audience. Others whispered about UFO abductions, a popular theory in the 1950s for explaining the unexplainable. The investigation did uncover a few puzzling details. It turned out that William Patterson had made several large cash withdrawals in the months before they disappeared, totaling around $100,000, a huge sum back then. This led to guesses that maybe they were planning to leave, or perhaps William was involved in something secret that needed a lot of cash. But the real reason for these withdrawals was never figured out. Adding another layer of mystery, reports surfaced in 1959, 2 years after they disappeared, suggesting the Pattersons had been seen in Mexico. Some witnesses claimed to have seen a couple matching their description in various Mexican cities. Investigators chased these leads, traveling south of the border, but every trail eventually went cold. Were these real sightings, or just cases of mistaken identity fueled by all the publicity? It was impossible to know for sure. The mystery of the Pattersons became an urban legend in El Paso and beyond. Their elegant home, left silent and empty, became a kind of local landmark, a real reminder of the couple who had just ceased to exist. Stories circulated, passed down through generations, each one adding its own little twist to the tale. The lack of any solid evidence let imaginations run wild. Years went by. Leads dried up. Witnesses' memories faded. In 1964, 7 years after they were last seen, William and Margaret Patterson were declared legally dead. This legal step, however, did little to fill the emotional or factual hole left by their disappearance. For their friends, their former employees, and the wider community, the question of what really happened remained a painful, unanswered puzzle. Even today, more than 60 years later, the Patterson case continues to fascinate and frustrate amateur detectives and true crime fans. Was it a perfect crime? A meticulously planned escape? Or something far stranger? The technological limits of the 1950s, no widespread CCTV, limited forensic science, no digital footprints, meant that an investigation relying heavily on witness accounts and physical evidence was seriously handicapped when neither was available. The Patterson disappearance stands as a stark example of how even prominent, seemingly secure people can be utterly wiped from their known existence. Their story is a chilling reminder of how fragile normal life can be and the enduring power of an unsolved mystery. Unlike a honeymoon trip gone wrong in a wild, remote place, the Pattersons vanished from the very heart of their own comfortable, civilized world, leaving behind a legacy of silence and a void that no amount of guessing has ever been able to fill. What happened to William and Margaret Patterson? The truth, it seems, vanished right along with them, somewhere between their ordinary Tuesday and an eternity of unanswered questions. Story 3, Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. The last ride into a lingering night. The night of February 19, 2005, was meant to be a pretty typical Saturday night in Philadelphia. For Danielle Imbo, a 34-year-old mom with a young son, and Richard Petrone Jr., a 35-year-old dad with a teenage daughter, it was a chance to relax, share some laughs, and just enjoy being together. Danielle and Richard weren't a brand-new couple on some grand romantic adventure. They were longtime friends whose relationship had, according to some, recently started to become something more. Both were devoted parents, deeply connected to their families and communities in Philadelphia and its suburbs. The idea that they would willingly walk away from their children and their lives was, to everyone who knew them, simply unthinkable. Their evening started at a bar called Abilene on South Street, a lively, busy spot in Philadelphia. They were with another couple, having drinks and chatting. Around 11:45 p.m., Danielle and Richard decided to call it a night. They said their goodbyes and left the bar, stepping out into the cool February air. Richard had driven his black 2001 Dodge Dakota pickup truck, a pretty distinctive vehicle that would soon become the main focus of a desperate search. They were last seen walking towards his truck, presumably to head home. And then, nothing. They never made it to their homes. They never contacted their families again. Danielle Imbo, Richard Petrone Jr., and Richard's black Dodge Dakota pickup vanished without a trace. The next day, a horrible feeling of unease started to creep in among their families. Danielle was known for being reliable and always in touch, especially about her son. Richard was similarly a dedicated father. When calls and texts went unanswered, and they didn't show up for things they had planned, panic truly set in. Missing persons reports were filed, and an investigation began that would quickly grow, pulling in local police, state authorities, and eventually the FBI, as the completely baffling nature of their disappearance became terrifyingly clear. The first hours and days of the search were frantic. Investigators scoured South Street and the areas around it for any tiny clue. Did anyone see the couple after they left the bar? Did any security cameras catch Richard's truck leaving the area? Even though South Street is a pretty busy place, no definite sightings of them or the truck after they left Abilene could be confirmed. It was as if they had just driven off the face of the earth. The search for Richard's truck was especially intense. A vehicle that size doesn't just disappear. Police looked into every possibility. Had it been carjacked? Had it been in an accident and somehow gone unnoticed? They conducted extensive searches of local waterways, including the Delaware and Schuylkill rivers, based on the grim theory that the truck might have accidentally or intentionally ended up underwater. Divers braved cold, murky waters, and sonar scans were used, but the Dodge Dakota stayed missing. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the complete lack of any leads was agonizing for the families. Both Danielle and Richard had active cell phones, but all activity on their accounts stopped abruptly that night. Their bank accounts and credit cards remained untouched after they disappeared, which pretty much ruled out the idea that they'd run off to start a new life. There was no evidence they'd planned to leave. They left behind clothes, personal items, and most importantly, their children, whom they adored. The theories about their disappearance were numerous and deeply unsettling. One theory that kept coming up was that they were victims of foul play, maybe a targeted attack. Richard worked for his family's bakery and was described as a hard-working man. Danielle was a loan processor. Neither seemed to have any known enemies or be involved in anything that would put them at such extreme risk. However, investigators looked into every angle, including the possibility of a murder-for-hire plot. Rumors and whispers started to circulate, as they often do in such high-profile, baffling cases. Had one of them been the target, and the other simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was the motive something completely unexpected? The FBI publicly stated they believed the couple was murdered, but without bodies or a crime scene, proving this has been impossible. Another scenario they considered was an accident. Could Richard have lost control of his truck, veering off a road into some remote area or a body of water where they just hadn't been found? While it's possible, the huge searches of roads, desolate areas, and waterways around Philadelphia and beyond turned up nothing. For a large pickup truck to stay hidden for so long, despite such massive efforts, seemed unlikely, yet not entirely out of the question. The emotional toll on their families has been immense. Danielle's son, Joe, and Richard's daughter, Angela, have grown up under the shadow of this inexplicable loss, their childhoods forever marked by the absence of a beloved parent and the torture of not knowing what happened. Marge Sexton, Richard's mother, became a fierce advocate for her son and Danielle, working tirelessly to keep their case in the public eye, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have that one piece of information that could finally solve the mystery. Over the years, various tips and leads have come in, but none have led to a breakthrough. The case has been featured on national television shows, and a significant reward, currently at $50,000, has been offered for information leading to their whereabouts or the arrest of those responsible. Yet, even after nearly 2 decades, the silence continues. The disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. is a stark reminder that even in a busy city, in an age of supposedly increasing connectivity, people can still vanish completely. Their case really highlights the particular horror of not knowing. Without answers, without closure, families are left in a constant state of limbo, unable to fully mourn, unable to completely move on. The not knowing becomes its own unique form of torture. What happened after they left that bar on South Street? Did they encounter someone with evil intentions? Did a tragic accident happen in some unbelievably hidden spot? Or is the truth something else entirely, something no one has even thought of yet? The black Dodge Dakota pickup truck, a key piece of this puzzle, remains missing, believed by investigators to hold crucial clues if it could ever be found. The investigation into the disappearance of Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr. is still open and active. Their families continue to hope and pray for answers, for an end to the agonizing uncertainty. Their story isn't just a Philadelphia mystery. It's a universal horror story about a night out that turned into an unending nightmare, about 2 vibrant lives that just winked out of existence, leaving behind a void filled only with questions, sorrow, and the chilling reality that sometimes people simply vanish forever. These stories are deeply unsettling, aren't they? They show that sometimes the biggest horrors are the ones we just can't explain. If you find these accounts as compelling as we do and want to explore more unsolved mysteries and true crime stories, please think about subscribing to our channel and clicking that notification bell so you don't miss our future dives into the unknown. Story 4. The Shared Nightmare, Patterns and Reflections. The cases of Glen and Bessie Hyde, William and Margaret Patterson, and Danielle Imbo and Richard Petrone Jr., though separated by many years and totally different situations, share some haunting things in common that really speak to a particular kind of horror. In every case, couples bound by love, friendship, or shared adventure, stepped out of the world they knew into an unexplainable emptiness. Their disappearances were sudden, leaving behind lives cut off mid-sentence and loved ones thrown into a nightmare of not knowing. One of the most striking patterns is the almost total lack of real evidence. For the Hydes, it was an abandoned but perfectly fine boat. For the Pattersons, an empty house and untouched money. For Imbo and Petrone, a missing truck and 2 cell phones that just went dead. Investigators in each case faced a frustrating lack of clues, a vacuum where there should have been a ton of information. This absence of evidence is exactly what keeps these mysteries alive. Without a crime scene, without bodies, without definite proof of what happened, the door stays wide open for endless guessing. Another common thread is how these vanishings happened against a backdrop of normal life, or even happy expectation. The Hydes were on their grand honeymoon adventure. The Pattersons were living their established, comfortable lives. Imbo and Petrone were just enjoying a casual night out. There was no clear warning of doom, no obvious danger they knowingly walked into, which makes their disappearances even more chilling. It suggests a terrifying thought, that the very fabric of ordinary life can be ripped apart without any warning at all. Investigative challenges are also a theme that keeps coming up. In the earlier cases like the Hydes and the Pattersons, the limits of technology at the time played a big role. The lack of sophisticated forensic tools, surveillance cameras, and widespread communication networks meant that searches were much harder and less likely to find those tiny but crucial clues. Even in the more recent case of Imbo and Petrone, despite all the advances of the 21st century, the fact that 2 people in a large vehicle could simply vanish from a populated area shows the huge difficulties investigators face when the first moments of a disappearance give no immediate answers. These stories haunt us for some deep reasons. They tap into basic fears, the fear of the unknown, the fear of sudden loss, and the fear that people we love, or even ourselves, could just be erased. The romantic element, especially with honeymooners or established couples, adds another layer of tragedy. These are people who have promised their lives to each other, only to have that shared future brutally and inexplicably stolen away. The lovers vanish forever idea really hits home because it twists an ideal of togetherness into a symbol of ultimate, unresolved separation. The lack of closure is perhaps the cruelest part. Families are left to deal not only with grief, but with a constant, gnawing uncertainty. Was it an accident? Was it foul play? Did they choose to leave? Without answers, the healing process is always stalled, and the shadows of the missing hang heavy over generations. These cases become more than just news stories. They turn into cautionary tales, local legends, and sober reminders of how fragile life is and the mysteries that human efforts sometimes just can't solve. They remain open wounds in our collective memory, forcing us to ask, again and again, what really happened? The romantic idea of a journey shared, a life lived together, is a powerful one. But when that journey suddenly ends, not with a goodbye, but in an unbreakable silence, it leaves a permanent scar on how we see safety and certainty. The stories of couples like the Hydes, the Pattersons, and Imbo and Petrone aren't just tales of disappearance. They're records of love cut short, futures stolen, and questions that echo unanswered through time. Their happy plans just vanished into thin air, leaving behind a legacy of confusion and heartache. What turns a dream adventure, a quiet life, or a simple night out into an eternal mystery? Sometimes, despite all our efforts, despite all our technology and determination, The answers stay just out of reach, locked away with those who disappeared. The horror isn't just in the act of disappearing, but in the lasting silence that follows. A silence that forces us to face the unsettling truth that sometimes, forever, takes on a meaning far more chilling than any vow could ever imagine. These are the cases where loving couples vanish, and all that's left are the haunting echoes of what might have been. The emptiness left by these disappearances is a chilling reminder of the unknown. If you want to explore other unsolved cases and compelling true crime stories, be sure to check out the videos recommended on your screen. Don't forget to like this video if you found it thought-provoking, and subscribe to the channel for more content that explores the shadows of mystery. If you have any information on any unsolved case, please contact the authorities. You never know what piece of information might finally bring some closure.